This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy and Gary Vasilash, episode 584 for January 13th of 2022, car dealers and their fight against EV startups. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Gary.
John, I barely recognize you. It's been so long.
I know it. First show of 2022, and man, it's great to be back on again.
Yeah, you know it. So because it is the start of the show, because it's the start of a new year, I'm going to go back to an old habit and ask you a question about what happened today in history. Okay. And this is going to be very easy or to be very hard. Okay. So this has to do with 1997. Okay. I want to ask you, what do these four vehicles have in common? The Corvette C5, the Dodge Durango, the Toyota Sienna, and the Ford Escort ZX2. Who can forget it?
What do they have in common?
Mm-hmm.
They made their debut at the Detroit Auto Show.
See? Told you it'd be easy.
It was a guess. I mean, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, you did know it, but you just didn't know that you knew it.
That's
yeah,
exactly right.
So this is the 1997 North American International Auto Show, and we just learned this week that in September, the show, after 3 years, will be back in downtown Detroit.
That's right. No, that's good news. It's good to hear that the auto show is going back downtown.
Absolutely. So okay, so let's move on from there, and
well, introduce our guest journalist today.
Okay, we're back by popular demand. Alexa St. John, who is now with Business Insider. She covers transportation. The last time she was on the show, she was with Automotive News. And so, Alexa, welcome back.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here, and Happy New Year as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah, we can still say Happy New Year, even though we're in the middle of the month.
I think so.
Right. We're close to the middle.
It's gone by so quickly so far that I still feel like it's the second or third.
Yeah, it's a very strange world.
Yeah, well, hey, let's get our special guest on for the first half of the show. Tim Jackson, the president and CEO of the Colorado Automobile Dealers Association. Tim, it is terrific to have you back on here.
You bet. Well, I think it may be my first time on After Hours with Autoline, and I've been on your weekly show twice, but it's an honor to be on. I always enjoy Gary's trivia at the start of the show. He usually outsmarts me. I don't usually get the right answers the first time, but it's also good to be on with Alexa. You used to be with Automotive News. I'm an Automotive News subscriber and a Business Insider subscriber, so I keep up with Alexa indirectly as well.
All right. Well, I'm
That's
glad to have you on both sides.
Yeah. Well, Tim, as you'll recall, you had written an email to me saying, hey, you guys were criticizing dealers on a show, and you didn't like what we were saying, and you wanted us to correct that. And I said, hey, the best way to do that is come on the show.
Well,
So
absolutely.
It's great
the opportunity.
Yeah. No, I've always liked having you on because in my mind, you're such a sensible person. You approach this in a very sensible way. But let's get the conversation going in this way. What do you make of all these EV startups? Tesla, notably, I mean, it led the charge of saying, we don't need franchise dealers whatsoever. We are going to sell direct to consumers. And, all the other startups are following suit. None of them are going, to my knowledge, with franchise dealers. And we'll see how that works out. But so far, it seems to be working for Tesla. How do you see it?
Well, is it working for Tesla? First off, I agree with you that there are a series of new EV startup companies. First, we don't know if those companies will make it or not. Some will. Hopefully, they will for the consumers that they sell to and serve. But then the question is it better and are the customers better served with that factory service center wherever they choose to put those versus having franchise dealers all over the country and all around the world. And as you and I have talked before, and everybody in the industry and outside the industry knows, that's where the new car dealers are. They're in the communities. In Colorado, there are 260 new car dealer franchise stores. We count them as rooftops, but those are spread out in 58 different communities around the state. And of course, that number nationally is around 17,000 and on the number of rooftops, but I suspect that's over 3, 4, maybe even 5,000 different communities around the country. And that's where the new car dealers are there to serve the customer and to take care of that car and the new car customer after the sale. And so I would question whether this new model is the best model for, there has to be a win-win-win. It's not just a win for the automaker, as you mentioned, Tesla in this case, or others that may follow. There has to be a win for the customer as well. And the customer has to be able to get that car serviced when the customer has service needs, whether it's warranty or something after the warranty. And that's where new car dealers could be helpful in those situations, and I think is helpful. By the way, there are some new EV startups, at least one that I know of, that is using the franchise dealer model, and that's working very well in Denver. I was at the grand showroom opening of the new Polestar store in Denver. It operates just a few blocks from the Tesla store, and as I understand, is one of the top Polestar dealerships in the nation. And that the dealer that has it would like to open some more points as well. But they are growing sales every month in and month out, of course, year in and year out, but they haven't been there many years. But they have built a brand new showroom for Polestar, which Polestar didn't have to do. The dealer did for Polestar, but it's designed to serve the customer. So, on this, John, and I know we'll get into all the details, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions you, Gary, or Alexa have on this. But I think what we have to look at is what's best for the long term, and how is the customer best served? Is the customer best served in this Tesla direct sales and service center model, or is the customer best served in the franchise dealer model? I'm here to tell you, I think they'll be better served in the franchise dealer model long term.
Alexa.
I have a lot of different thoughts on this, since I pay attention to both the incumbent automakers as well as these startups. And I do think that obviously there has been a place for the dealership in the car buying experience. I mean, you always sort of hear the trope that consumers, don't like sitting in a dealership for 4 or 8 hours, picking out their car, signing all the paperwork, going through all of that. But I do think dealers are working on streamlining those processes, being far more efficient. And Tim, you're much more qualified to talk about those sorts of parts to the process. But at the same time, we have seen a lot of demand for the EV startups that seem to be making good on their promises, and that aren't necessarily going to be using that sort of model. I think, like, as of last year or so, Rivian had 70,000 plus reservations for their vehicles, and they're certainly not planning on that sort of dealership, model. But they're also looking at different types of experiences to provide their customers with. Perhaps they're not dealerships, but maybe they're showrooms. They still have the vehicle available to look at, to experience. And I still think there's a part of the car buying population that really, wants to see the car before they make the purchase. I mean, I think that's a pretty normal thing to be interested in. So, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I think it does depend on the type of vehicle and the type of consumer as well.
Right.
So Tim, let me ask you, what would these 70,000 people, assuming they all get the Rivian vehicles, I mean, what would they be missing by not having a dealer sell them the vehicle?
Well, let's start with the sale, but end with the service. And I think that's where the big difference is going to be recognized, is on the service, or the access to the service, the access to keeping that car on the road. And so let's go with you sent Rivian. So I'll go with your challenge on Rivian. Rivian, by the way, the car looks really cool. It's the R1T and R1S, which is the pickup and the SUV. One of our employees here in our office followed one into downtown Denver just yesterday morning and snapped a photo of it at a red light. So there are a few of those getting out on the road, but not many of the 70,000 have been delivered yet, as you all know. But here's where the challenge. I don't think there will be a challenge per se. If the customer wants the vehicle, as you all know, customers might go halfway across the country to pick up a vehicle if that's the only place they can get it. It's a one-time trip. They know that, and they'll get the vehicle back and then worry about taking care of it after the sale. I think the real challenge will be the service after the sale, and that's what we've seen with the Tesla model in particular. And since John led with Tesla, Gary led with Rivian, I'll go back to the Tesla model because we do know a little more about the Tesla model now that it's been out there for a while. I mentioned that Polestar store, mentioned it's really close to a Tesla gallery. That Tesla gallery is in the Cherry Creek Shopping Center, but Tesla has announced, they've announced it once before and didn't do it. Now they've announced it again and probably will do it, are closing down their galleries, and they're opting for the new Tesla model on service centers looks almost identically like the dealership model. They have a storefront, they have a sign out in front, they have some inventory. If they're lucky, they have some inventory on the ground. They have a showroom, they have salespersons. They may not call them salespersons, but let's say sales representatives. They have a finance department, they have a controller, they have an F&I department for finance and insurance. They have a service center that will have a service drive. They'll have service techs. And you know what? A lot of those Tesla service centers are actually in former dealerships that serve some of the traditional models that now are carrying a Tesla flag. One in Denver used to be a BMW store. One in Colorado used to be a Toyota store. BMW outgrew their store. Toyota outgrew their store, and they have new stores down the road. But Tesla is in that former older, smaller store, which is maybe all they need for now. But to go back, I think, to the thrust of your question, Gary, is that service after the sale. And we're already seeing, and by the way, let me at the outset say, I hope no customers are harmed with these new startups. And nobody wants to ever see that happen. But we haven't seen, you guys have been in the industry, around the industry all your lives, as I have, and Alexa's maybe not as old as we are, but she's around the industry now. But we can remember, if you think back, some brands that started to come into the U.S. and then didn't. And or brands that went away. And so the dealer is still on dealer street, even when the manufacturer goes out of business. And that's not going to happen if any of these new startups, and pick your name that we've already talked about or others that will follow, when the factory closes, let's say if, and we hope that doesn't happen, if and when the factory closes, so do all those service centers that are not franchised service centers around the U.S. and around the world.
But Tim, that's happened with franchise dealers. I mean, Hummer comes to mind, Pontiac, Saturn, Saab, and all that. And when they shut down, their stores closed down. And so you might have been able to go to another GM dealer if you had a Hummer, because many of the components were the same, but a lot were not. And I dare say most of those people who had all those cars ended up going to independent repair shops, not to franchise dealerships. Well,
Since you mentioned Saab, and those are all fair. Every one of those examples you said, not only fair, but actually good examples. But almost in every instance, and I can just speak for here in Colorado, but I think I can almost nationwide, that dealer is on dealer street with other brands and still in business. So a Saab customer in this Denver market that's over on Colorado Boulevard, which you may not know, but not too far from downtown, had bought a Saab. And when General Motors announced the Saab brand, along with Hummer, Pontiac, and Saturn at the time, would be discontinued, that customer came back into the dealer, which was still a Chevrolet dealer on Colorado Boulevard, and said, well, Mr. Dealer, I bought this Saab from you. I wouldn't have bought this if I'd have known that the Saab was going out of business. And the dealer says, well, I didn't know they were going out of business. That was out of the auto task force set up by the president's administration in the restructuring, and I had no idea. Well, no, you are in the industry. You had to know. No, I didn't know. Well, you had to know. But you're a good customer, and this customer had bought other products from other new cars from this dealer. So the dealer actually bought the Saab back a year and a half after the Saab was originally sold. And what did the dealer do? The dealer needed it as a courtesy loaner on the service drive, so put it in the courtesy loaner business. And by the way, lost quite a bit of money on that transaction, as you might imagine, probably about $15,000 or $20,000, but kept the customer happy, and the customer stayed a customer of the dealership, and the dealership stayed in business as Chevrolet, not Saab. And everybody is still smiling today. If you take that same example and apply it to any of these new startups, it's going to be different, because there's not going to be a dealer on Dealer Street to buy the car back, to service the car, to maintain the car, to fight with a bankruptcy court to get a warranty paid. And we hope that never happens. That would be a black eye on the industry, but we're in the industry, and that's one of the concerns that we look at. And I think it's a fair concern. And I think if you think out of the possibilities ahead, that's likely to happen with some of these brands. And there's likely to be people left without a manufacturer. They'll be orphaned, as they say. They'll have a car, but no parent company to take care of the warranty, the service, to provide parts, service, or warranty, and help keep that car on the road. And those are big investments, as you know, as we all know, all too well.
So I guess, Tim, I don't understand why I can buy virtually anything else from a company. If I want to buy an Apple computer, I can go to an Apple store and buy it from them, or I could go to Best Buy and buy one. Why is it that automobiles are so uniquely different that they can only be purchased from a middleman and not from the factory? And, in this whole service thing, I mean, it seems to me that, Roger Penske, who owns lots and lots and lots of dealerships, for a while now, I don't know if this is national or just local, but he took over the Kmart auto service centers. There was one on 7 Mile and Newburgh that John may be familiar with. And so, I mean, as a customer, I feel very confident taking a car to a Penske service center, regardless of what the make was.
No, and I think that's a fair question. I think maybe let's go to the first part of your question. I think you maybe diverted a little bit off that, but why is it important, or why do we think it's the best process to have the franchise dealer there? That gives the local operator in the community that the customer lives, works, resides, and operates, a neighbor that's taking care of that. Now, does that have to be? No, but not all of the like, you can buy a Verizon phone directly from Verizon, or you can buy a Verizon phone through a franchised representative of Verizon. Now, what has happened in automotive, and it dates back to the early 1900s, 1908. We've got franchise dealers in Colorado that their great granddad was a franchise dealer in Colorado with Henry Ford in 1908. Another dealer that's a Ford generation dealer on 104th, but used to be on Broadway, that came to Denver. He was employee number 147 with Henry Ford in Detroit. And I don't know if you, I know you two, John and Gary in particular, are real historians in the industry, but did you know that there was a second Model T factory after the Rouge factory in Dearborn, and that second Model T factory was here in Denver, and it opened in 1913, and the building still stands today. Wow. And we've got a picture taken in front of that building on June 9th of 1914. We stood in front of our building and took a photo of the photo. But so Al O'Meara came to Denver because he had tuberculosis, had TB, and Denver was famous for National Jewish Health. And his doctor in Detroit said, you need to get to a high elevation area with low humidity. And I recommend Denver because they treat tuberculosis at National Jewish. So he asked for a transfer with Henry Ford, came with Henry Ford, worked in the Model T factory here, and in 1913 started O'Mara Ford. And O'Mara Ford still operates today, 4 generations later. That's a lot of longevity. But more to your point, why is that? Well, Henry Ford knew that he had his hands full in designing the cars, building out that assembly line process that he was so famous for, and figuring out the technology, the parts, tools, and equipment and power source technology to build those cars and make them work. He knew he had his hands full in building the cars. He wanted to offload the rest of the system. He wanted to have the cars sold at the end of the assembly line. So that assembly line, and most people and many of your viewers probably don't know that the dealers actually pay for the cars before they come off the assembly line. And when it gets the VIN number and it's scheduled to go down the assembly line, the factory pulls out the proceeds, the revenue for it to build that car. Now, they may not pay an interest rate on it until they get it on their lot. But Ford and all the other traditional automakers are paid for those cars before they're even built, and that's a big difference in the current in this current new process. So why is that better? We think it's better. I said there had to be a win-win, and I think a win-win-win. So that's the factory, the customer, the dealer, and the community. There's 4 wins, and with the franchise system. And so the factory gets paid for the car before it's even built. They don't have to worry about the revenues. It's already sold. Hopefully the dealer will sell it soon. And as you all know, the inventory levels have gone way down from what they used to be, from let's say 5 million some odd cars on inventory to maybe 500,000. So there's a lot less inventory cost even at the dealer level today. But so Henry Ford started the franchising dealers. And oh, by the way, another famous Michigander. I've never been from Michigan, but I feel like I've got Michigan blood in me because I've got.
It's because we're providing all those cars to you guys. So.
There you are. So Ransom Eli Olds over in Lansing, Michigan, who started, of course, Oldsmobile, and he was building the curved dash Oldsmobile even before Henry Ford had the Model T in Dearborn. He was building the curved dash Oldsmobile in 1898, and then the first New York Auto Show started in 1900, and he went to the second New York Auto Show with the curved dash Oldsmobile in 1901. And he had franchise dealers come into New York to see the curved dash Oldsmobile. One of them ordered 750 curved dash Oldsmobiles. Well, Ransom Eli Olds, that's a pretty good deal because they're sold at the end of as soon as he builds them. So it was good for Ransom Eli Olds. It was good for Henry Ford in 1908. It was good for General Motors, which I've got in my Rotary Club presentations. General Motors started in Flint, Michigan on September 23rd, 1908, and they were franchising dealers the very same year. So it's worked for them. Now, over the years, the culture has, and in Colorado, they started in the 1930s, creating franchise laws that govern those relationships between the dealers and the automakers. And in all 50 states have franchise laws that govern that relationship. Of course, they don't govern a relationship if there is no franchise dealer. But to your point, Gary, I think the factories started the franchise system because they wanted and needed it, and it worked out. And it still, we believe, still works out very well today. We think it works out for the manufacturers so they can stay focused on the quality and the product. And my gosh, as exciting as this industry has been for the last 120 years, it's even more exciting today with all these new products coming to market. And think of the amount of investment that all the manufacturers, whether they're new startups or the traditional automakers, are having to make to get those cars off the assembly line. So this is one additional cost that they don't have with the franchise system. So that's
Alexa.
a long answer.
Yeah. Go ahead, Alexa.
No, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned service as so important, of course, and obviously, as all of these automakers are making this transition to electric, we're seeing that these vehicles might not need the same type of service that an ICE vehicle would need. So I'm curious, your thoughts on that, the dealer's place in that, given that EVs won't need an oil change, for example, and more and more automakers are leaning into OTA updates for the software parts of the vehicle. I mean, do you see those things as a threat to the service side?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I think there is this concept, or let's say urban myth, urban myth that's out there, that dealers don't want to sell electric cars because there is no service. So I'll lead with another story, and that is that we had a Volkswagen dealer, and he's on the National Dealer Council, very active. He's actually now has 2 Volkswagen stores. He's also a 4th generation dealer. So a lot of those out here. But he's very excited about the new ID4 and the new investment that Volkswagen is making in electrification. But his service manager comes to the dealer and says, well, Mr. Dealer, I'm concerned that there's not going to be any service needed on these electric vehicles. I don't know about the future of our service department and what it portends over the long haul for service, because I'm in the service business in your store, and that's what you hold me accountable for. So I'm concerned. And the dealer didn't bat an eye, didn't flinch, really didn't pause. He said, that's a fair question. And I can see why you may think that, because there's a lot of belief out there that electric cars won't require any service. But there is this one famous electric car company that has the most electric cars on the road today that's been out of the chute. You may have heard of it. It begins with T, called Tesla. He says if they are not service required for Tesla, why don't you? I think they do require a lot of service. So at least maybe more than Tesla is able to provide in a timely manner. Why don't you go to the time and trouble to call and schedule a service appointment and see how long it takes to get in for service? And oh, by the way, how long is it taking to get in if I bring a car into your service department today? Well, typically it's a week to 10 days right now on our service wait. Well, just see what it is on the local Tesla store if you want to bring your Tesla in. So, and by the way, I think it's going to take more than an hour for you to even get somebody live on the phone to talk to schedule the service. So I will challenge you with that to start with. So the service director took him up on the challenge, and 90 minutes later, an hour and a half later, he says, I've been an hour and a half on the phone and I haven't even got to talk to somebody even to schedule my Tesla. So I do believe there is going to be a demand for service. Consider me no longer concerned. So, and I think, Alexa, that was a good question. And John alluded earlier to whether or not dealers want to sell electric cars. I can proudly say that just behind this backdrop with the Autoline after hours, and out in our side street, and both on our alley and our main road in, we have electric car chargers at our association headquarters. We were among the first to put in electric chargers, not only in Denver, but in Colorado. Here's my trivia question. I'll throw it to Gary. Gary, how long do you think we've had electric car charging stations at the Dealer Association office in Colorado?
5 years.
You're close, but you're still low. We've had them since 2014. So now we're coming into 2022. So it's coming up on 8 years. And all
right, let me throw some numbers at you. Okay, I want to switch this up a little bit. So on the show where we were being critical, I quoted these numbers from the KMPG Global Automotive Executive Survey. This is 1,100 executives from 31 countries. And 78% of them said that the majority of vehicle purchases would be online by 2030. And 34% think that from 60 to 79% of vehicles will be direct to consumer by 2030. So you have all of these automotive executives from all over the world who are basically saying that, this is going to be, you're going to order online, and a large percentage of those vehicles are going to be arriving the same way that Amazon Prime is delivering like everything.
Right. Well, no, and that's good question, fair question. I saw that survey as well. And I as soon as I saw that was out there, I dug into it. I think it's an inaccurate assessment, an inaccurate prediction, and although I don't question KPMG's intent or their sources, I just think they're way overly optimistic. And
But Tim, don't you think what's going to happen is that franchise dealers are not going away? I mean, legally, that's not even going to happen, right? But they're going to act more like what Gary is describing. You'll be able to do most of your shopping online, even though the portal will be through a franchise dealership, or at some point get shuttled to that, and the dealer will probably come and deliver it to your home. Don't you see that happening?
I do. That's something I can agree with, and I think we're seeing that evolve today.
But here's my question. I agree with you. I think franchise dealers are going to be the ace up the sleeve for the traditional automakers. But here's the problem I've got with it is what's wrong with legally allowing these startups to do whatever they want? I mean, in Colorado, do you limit how many Tesla stores there can be?
No, and that's a fair question.
I'll tell you, in Michigan, we do. We have one Tesla store for a state of 10 million people, one service center. I'm sure Tesla would like to put in more service centers. Legally, they're not allowed to. We have a very powerful dealer lobby in Michigan. But as you know, this is replicated in many, many states. To me, this is restraint of trade. What's wrong with a new company that's never, ever used franchise dealers before? And by the way, I would say Polestar legally had to go with franchise dealers because it's part of Volvo and it has operated with franchise dealers. But what is wrong with a brand new company that's never, ever used franchise dealers that wants to do something different? I mean, this is America, right? Free enterprise. Why can't they do that?
Right. No, you make a really good argument. And I think, and from a standpoint, and I can only speak for Colorado, not the other 49 states, but Tesla and Rivian and Lucid and anybody else that wants to set up a shop here and deliver their cars direct can do that in Colorado. There is restrictions if they do have, and you made this, you were very clear, John, and I appreciate that in your description. If they have franchise dealers, they can't set up a shop right across from the franchise dealer and compete with them. And that's what we will go to the Capitol and fight for a fair marketplace under the current regime that that was established and we've been operating under for the last 120 years. But so I'm very clear here. And to your question, I don't want any of your, and you have a lot of viewers, by the way. This is one of my favorite shows. I haven't been on it before today on this particular the Thursday afternoon after hours version, but I do watch it a lot, as you know, and you have a lot of viewers and you'll have a lot of comments, and you and I will go back and read under those comment threads. And so to be very clear, in Colorado, Tesla could set up, if they wanted to put in Tesla service centers in all 58 of those communities that we have franchise dealers, they could do so. Rivian could do it. Lucid could do it. Polestar could do it as their own brand. They couldn't do it as their Volvo brand, and they are operating. I think they could do it here, but because they're operating as a new startup. But I'm not sure why they would want to, and I don't think it would necessarily be good for consumers. But they could do it. What it takes away, and one thing we haven't covered, if I can jump into this and make sure that it doesn't get left out, is the interbrand and intra-brand competition that franchise dealers offer. And intra-brand. So there is there's a difference with the distinction, as they say. One is that with multiple franchise dealers, then the Ford dealers are competing with other Ford dealers in that market, but they're also that's interbrand, but intra-brand, they're competing with Chevrolet dealers, GMC dealers, Ram dealers, Toyota dealers. So that's why we think consumers are so well served on the sale. You don't get that if it's on the factory sale. And oh, by the way, and I'm sure you guys haven't brought it up, but on this call, maybe it did come up. It did come up on the our Dealers Doomed session that I emailed John about. But in most cases, dealers are selling those cars, those brand new, shiny new, picture perfect in most ways cars, and doing it under MSRP. Now, with the
I just heard Cox Automotive just did a survey and basically said that most cars this past year have sold above MSRP.
Okay, I don't want to argue with Cox, and I've got the latest data from JD Power, friends over at JD Power, and their PIN data. So it is much closer to MSRP today than it was. So I did a column with the Colorado Sun here in 2019. I called up my buddies at JD Power to get their latest PIN data. And at that time, so let's go back pre-inventory shortage, because that has changed things a lot. Can we all agree? I see head shaking there. That's changed things a lot. So, but let's say the inventory shortages and supply chain challenges, we were at 98.5% of the new car transactions were sold under MSRP. That has changed a lot, but exiting from 2021, which is now with the current inventory constriction, if you will, if we can call it that, it's about 90% are running at MSRP or no more than 5% above. So yes, and that's a big difference, being below versus above. But you know what's changed a lot more than the sales price on new cars? And you guys know this, I know you know it, is the sale price on used cars. So I'm often asked, should I get a new car in this current market and pay MSRP a little bit above or a little bit below, or buy a used car? And I said, if you're buying a late model used car, you're probably paying 20 to 40%, in some studies I've seen, as much as 50% more than you would have been just 3 to 5 years ago. So hope there's a lot of fodder. I want to throw it back to you guys to.
Yeah, no, here's another one then, Tim. I mean, this week alone, Ford had to send out a letter to its dealers because they were adding additional charges on to people who had put down a deposit for the Ford Lightning. And just using Ford as an example, there's all kinds of complaints all over social media of not just the F-150 Lightning, but with the new Bronco, with the Maverick. Dealers are tacking on, in many cases, thousands of dollars above the MSRP. It's got people hopping mad about this, to the point, like I said, that Ford had to send a letter to its dealers to say, cut this out.
No, I am not only aware of that, I'm well aware of it. And I don't like that any better than you do or anybody does. I'm not going to defend that practice by anybody, but I can tell you that there are a lot of dealers out there that will not sell over MSRP, And so that means that if there's a dealer out there that will not sell over MSRP, that means they're either selling at or below MSRP. And in the current model that we are operating under, the consumer has that choice. And just in this state alone, they'd have a choice. You mentioned Ford, they'd have a choice of 44 Ford dealers to choose from if they wanted to go that far. Yeah. And I can probably, I don't have a statistical number on this, but probably 40 of the 44 are not selling above MSRP. I don't like those reports. They hurt the industry. They hurt the dealers that are doing those. And I can't defend that, but we also can't restrict it under antitrust. We can't set prices collectively or across the board because of antitrust policy.
So Alexa, let me ask you, why do these new startup EV companies seem to not be going for the traditional franchise model?
Well, I mean, some of them have shown in a variety of ways that they're going to mimic Tesla. But I also think, again, it just depends on the vehicle. It depends on, the segment that they're trying to target. And I think it also depends on the consumer base. There might be a younger generation of consumers that unfortunately just doesn't necessarily see the need to walk into a dealership when they can just click on the computer and order a vehicle the same way they order anything else, to your point earlier. And I also think they're experimenting with the idea of, the showroom or, whatever the case might be, something that's not a traditional dealership, but still allows people to see the vehicle. Rivian's got some hubs, I believe, that they're experimenting with. Lucid as well. These showrooms, I'm forgetting the word that they're calling them, not showroom, but sort of a hub where you can see the vehicles and not have kind of all of the perceived pressures of being at a dealership. Those pressures that consumers think there are when they are at a dealership store. We see some of the Chinese EV makers in Asia are experimenting with that model as well, creating more of a community center rather than a place where a transaction has to be done. And I think that really just gets people's interest going, and just has shown so far, especially, like I said, in Asia, that you might not necessarily need that traditional model for the startup. And especially, I think, if you're going EV. I mean, again, the service differences, I think, have shown to these startups that they really might not need the traditional brick and mortar. But I think it'll be interesting. And I think Tim made a good point at the beginning in that some of these players likely won't make it. I mean, we've already seen some shakeout in the industry over the past couple of years with these startups. There's still, a rocky road to go. Not everyone is going to still be here come 2030, whatever the case might be. So I think there's still a lot of room for experimentation. But again, if you're tapping into a different generation or just segment, people have different desires. And for some, the convenience of simply just clicking online or being able to see the car, but not having to go through all the paperwork, in one sitting is very, very appealing to a lot.
Well said. Hey, look, we've gone longer on this segment than I had originally planned, but it was too good to cut it short. So we are going to have to take a break right now. We've got other things to get to, but Tim Jackson, thanks so much for coming on the show. You really argue your side very eloquently, and you make really good points.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I have a total respect for you, Autoline TV, Gary. It's good to be on with Alexa, and we'll always watch your show and keep up with what's going on. Thanks for the opportunity to be on and represent franchise new car dealers.
Thanks, Tim. We'll have you back again at some point.
You bet.
And right now, a shout out to our great sponsors. And we are back. I thought that was pretty good. I think Tim is, I was so pleased to hear him say he does not agree with dealers marking, tacking thousands of dollars above the MSRP. Some dealers will defend that, but I was very pleased to have Tim say that, they're against it.
Absolutely. No, I think that is really important. Obviously, I see where Tim is coming from, right? And a lot of people have said, does this really threaten that dealer model that he pointed out we've had for 100 years? I mean, I understand where the dealers are coming from. And many of the ones that I've spoken to have said exactly what he said. We will sell EVs. It's really not necessarily that these dealers don't want to sell EVs. I think, I've had several just say to me, we don't care if it's powered by water, whatever it is. But there are going to be some changes, I think, that come along with that. And I do think, the dealers that are innovating, finding sort of a happy medium, and just evolving with the space are really going to come out on top with all of this.
Mm-hmm. See, one of the things that I wonder about, and I've heard no one talk about this yet, and it just occurred to me today. So, there is this, because of the constraints, because there are fewer vehicles available, right? So cars are not necessarily overflowing in dealer lots, and that people are being encouraged now to order online, and they will then build the car, right? So doesn't this whole model of this purchase then build lend itself to not needing the franchise dealer? People are configuring, ordering, car gets built, car gets delivered, boom.
Yeah, look, clearly more people are ordering cars than instead of just buying off the lot. And the main reason is because there's not a whole lot on the lots.
Right. But I mean, so if the OEMs are saying, hey, we're making a lot of money by doing it this way, right?
Right.
So I just don't, I mean, when is the last time you used a travel agent to buy an airline ticket?
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you use a travel agent, you're paying what? You're paying a percentage, right?
Right.
And so how is that any different than buying a car, from directly from Delta?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really think a lot of it is generational in a sense. I just think the next generation of buyers, they just approach this a lot differently. And as I said earlier, that maybe it is sort of a myth, but people don't like to think that they're going to spend 8 hours at the dealership signing papers and going through that whole experience, especially when they have so many options online. They're already doing a majority of their research, online, or at least looking online prior to stepping foot in a store. There probably is a place for dealers, or again, some sort of experience in person, but I do think it's going to evolve dramatically, and especially with the shift to EVs.
Yeah. Yeah. So Gary, I know you got some other topics you'd like to get into.
Well, we talked, and this is always a hot topic, Tesla. So let's continue with it. So Elon tweeted out that he's going to be raising the price of full self-driving to $12,000. Interestingly enough, in July 2019, it was $5,000. So obviously he's looking at his revenue model and saying, gee, let's increase this a lot. And as you both know, and Alexa, you probably know this very well, this whole notion of full self-driving is not exactly full self-driving. So what's going on here?
Yeah, that's always an interesting one to me. I think I look at it a couple of different ways. Obviously, the full self-driving branding is still pretty problematic. I think sort of the investigations that have been placed into these vehicles when there's accidents, et cetera, the technology itself, I think that speaks for itself in a way. A lot of people have a misunderstanding of the technology or are just misusing it in a way that probably shouldn't be out on public roads. But at the same time, I think Tesla has shown that, people that like those vehicles, buy into the brand, believe in the brand, were there in the early days of the company. They can get away with a lot more than I think just the Detroit 3 or your average incumbent legacy automaker can get away with. We've seen, aside from the full self-driving, quality control challenges. It's, not a day goes by where I'm on Twitter scrolling through someone pointing out some sort of production or quality flaw in a Tesla and saying, well, yeah, XY component didn't work, but this is pretty good for Tesla. So I love my new car. Ford could never get away with that. So it's kind of interesting that they can continue to sort of push the limit in exactly, what people will go for. And I mean, we have to admit, Elon Musk has a lot of really loyal buyers and loyal fans.
Yeah, loyal fans with lots of money. I can't believe what he's charging for full self-driving, which, as we know, is not full self-driving. It's the best level 2 system in the world, but it's a level 2 system. And to charge 12 grand for that, to me, I can't believe people are paying that kind of money for it. And, here's the other thing. When you sell your car, it's disabled. The next person who buys your car used has got to pony up for full self-driving. So you have zero equity. This does not help the residual value of your car whatsoever. It's just 12 grand that you torched and hopefully got 12 grand worth of enjoyment out of using it. But, when you look at, for example, GM Super Cruise or the next one, Ultra Cruise, it's pretty much going to be able to do what full self-driving does. I think it's going to be out at the end of this year or early next year. And, I just hope General Motors isn't tempted to try to price it like Tesla has done. But I'm just flabbergasted at the price that Tesla is getting for this, because I can assure you, when you look at the componentry and the software and the engineering time that went into developing both the hardware and the software, it's nowhere near $12,000 a unit. It's probably more like $2,000 a unit. So that's 10 grand pure profit on a level 2 system. I'm just blown away that people pay that kind of money for it.
All right, so sticking with the paying lots of money and talking about sales and things like that. So this is Kelley Blue Book, which monitors sales and monitors pricing and so on. They came out with information this week, which says the average price paid for a new non-luxury vehicle last month, meaning December of 2021, was $43,072, slightly down from the record high set in November 2021, down by $70, but still more than $900 over sticker. For each of the last 6 months, the average price paid by consumers was above the MSRP. The average luxury buyer paid $64,864 for a new vehicle, a record-setting sum more than $1,300 above sticker price. For comparison, luxury vehicles were selling for more than $3,000 under MSRP 1 year ago. Okay, I ask both of you, are cars becoming unaffordable? And I use cars in the broadest sense.
Go ahead, Alexa.
Oh, I was going to let you take this one first.
Chickens.
I hope not. No, but it's just such a combination of factors that I know you both have talked about on this show, especially over the past year, that is really just continuing to cause a lot of problems for the end consumer. I have been looking at those numbers over the past couple of months. I actually wrote a piece about a month or so ago about, now is the worst time to buy a car, unfortunately, because of these numbers. So that's getting very, very scary. I mean, you look at sort of the future product pipelines, and I think automakers have at least, vocalized commitments to keeping these things affordable. Obviously should be a priority, but right now, and probably for the next year or so, given the supply chain constraints, the chip shortage, et cetera, things are looking bad on the affordability front.
Yeah, I totally agree. Even before COVID and the chip shortage, automakers were worried about affordability. And now we've seen the greatest price increase in the history of the automobile, and demand is there, and the automakers cannot believe the pricing that they're getting. And I think, they're just going to decide, even when the chips become readily available again, they're going to keep inventory much, much tighter, because they know that it's going to drive up pricing, and they'd rather have the pricing than the sales. And I think it's going to be an issue for the industry. And, for the poor consumer, as we talked about earlier, prices of used cars have gone through the roof. And so, we've seen over the last 30 years, the only thing that's kept the U.S. industry healthy is population growth. Roughly 5 to 6% of the population buys a new car every year. And it's been that, we've sort of plateaued. In a really good year, it's 18 million. It's never gone above that. If the same percentage of people bought a new car as they did even in the year 2000, we'd be selling something like 22 million or 23 million new cars a year. But we've priced about 5 million households out of the new car market. And I think if this continues, it's bad news for the industry.
Well, and then you have the other issue in terms of, one of the ramifications of the pandemic has been more people working from home. And even though more people are now slowly going back to the office, there's still going to be a non-trivial percentage of people who are not going to have to drive to work, or they don't have to drive to work 5 days a week. Maybe they'll have to go into the office 3 days a week. And suddenly maybe households can get by with one car rather than 2 cars or 3 cars or whatever it is. So that may also have an impact on driving down the number of vehicles that are going to be sold. And, and if they're at this price, I mean, it's going to be a real problem.
And John, you made a good point about the inventory levels too, throughout the past 12 months, although it's certainly been a struggle on all ends for the automaker, for the dealers, and the consumer. Inventory levels have been so down, and yet, the industry has been able to move forward. And so you are already hearing of the automakers certainly considering not going back to the level of inventories that they had long before COVID,
Right.
which, will probably make things stay roughly about the same as they have been for the past 12 months or so.
Here's a couple of other stats, historically, and I mean, this goes from the end of World War II up until very recently. The average American car buyer spent about 24 weeks of income, half a year's income, on the purchase of a new car. Well, Gary, would you say the new car today is what, 44,000, 45,000?
47.
Okay, 47,000, even more. So there's $94,000. Guess what? The average household doesn't make that money. The average household makes about $65,000. And so, the average car for them would have been, 30 to 32,000 bucks, somewhere in there. And so we've blown way past that historical relationship of half a year's income being devoted to the purchase of a new car. We're way past it. And I think that should be a danger signal for the industry.
But presumably they like to make money because just this very afternoon, before I got on the show, I was on a Cox Automotive presentation, and Charlie Chesbrough, the senior economist who has been on the show, basically pointed out that when you look at the revenue for 2021, the industry in billions was $649,000, which is greater than it was pre-pandemic, which was $647 billion, yet they sold far fewer vehicles. They're making a lot of money, by selling fewer vehicles. So what's the incentive for them, short term at least, to change behaviors?
There's zero.
Right.
And dealers are doing even better. I had an interview with Mark Lenave, who used to run Ford sales. He told me all his dealer buddies have tripled their profits in the last year. He said the average dealership made about 20 million bucks profit. They're making 60 million bucks on fewer sales right now. So you're right, Gary. There's no incentive to go back to the old model, because the new model, you make a whole lot more money for less work.
Especially on used too. That's, for used vehicles to be accelerating at the same rate.
Yeah.
All right. I want to get to two more things before we wrap this up.
Yep.
Okay. So CES last week, which I guess in some ways is the quasi auto show that, certainly the big news, I think, was General Motors revealed the Silverado EV, 400-mile range, 8,000 pounds of towing, 1,200 pounds payload. And I think in some ways, and speaking of affordability, they announced the Equinox EV, which will be available in 2023. And Mary Barra said that's about 30,000. So well below. Anyway, so what did you guys see at CES that impressed you? Anybody?
Well, there were several things. BMW had that car where you can change the paint color on it. I thought that was quite an interesting gimmick. Stellantis was there with the concept vehicle for an all-electric Chrysler brand vehicle. And they announced that the Chrysler brand will go all-electric by 2028. I thought those were pretty interesting. But to me, the most significant thing, and I was there, I physically went to Vegas, Hyundai put forth its vision for where mobility is going. And it had nothing to do with vehicles whatsoever. In fact, they've bought Boston Dynamics, which I think is the coolest robotics company in the world. And they see them building robots for us that will be our own avatar, but an avatar in the physical world. Well, you'll put on the Oculus goggles, and you'll be able to run around with your robot. You'll be able to sit in a chair at home, and your robot will go do things, and you'll live your world, your life in the physical world through this robot avatar. And then the next step beyond that is into the metaverse, where you have avatars in the metaverse and living that way too. And I was astonished. for a car company to be talking this way. And yeah, I think CES has emerged as the most important car show in the world right now. And here's Hyundai. They flew their chairman in from Korea. There was a lot of Koreans there, in fact, at the show. And for them to talk about, in fact, they coined a term, they call it meta mobility. And for them to put forth a vision like this and never mention cars, trucks, or vans in their presentation was astounding to me.
Sounds like a vision of hell to me, but Alexa.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't quite wrapped my head around the metaverse or meta mobility or really anything with meta in front of it just yet. I got to do some more reading up on that. I was not at the show in Vegas. I paid some attention from here in the Detroit area. And I think you pulled out all of the highlights, especially from GM. I think obviously the show just continued to emphasize that automakers are really saying that they're all in on EV, and the momentum just seems to continue to accelerate. It's certainly been a hectic couple of weeks already to start the year off and hear more and more of these promises around EVs. So I will be interested to watch some of those vehicles come to fruition here. But as it relates to the metaverse, I don't know. And I think though the point of kind of not even talking about vehicles, vans, whatever the case might be, is just a look towards the future of mobility that's not so individual passenger car dependent. We hear so many different startups talking about this. Yes, there will always be cars. I don't think here in Detroit especially we'll be able to pry cars away from people. But, especially following COVID and everything that changed in city centers, I think people have an appetite for a different type of mobility landscape that accommodates pedestrians more, accommodates, bike lanes, whatever the case might be, not just individual passenger cars. I know I'm saying that as an autos reporter, so that's all to say should be an interesting landscape moving forward. That's for sure.
See, but that's fine. I mean, so you made the mention, here in Detroit where the three of us are, and when you said that, it occurred to me that once upon a time, there's the alleged story that they were sitting up in the top of the GM building and looking down and saying, we'll never see foreign cars in the U.S. It'll always be the big three. And while the F-150 did, or the F-Series did, become again the number one selling vehicle in the United States, and the 40 years in a row, I believe, the leading pickup truck. The Camry, which actually had increased sales by 6% this past year, was the number one selling car, and the Toyota RAV4 was the number one selling utility vehicle. So, we think that maybe some of these changes won't happen, but look at what happened there in a comparatively short period of time. Okay, one more. I know John wanted to talk about this. The winners of the NACTOY Awards. Okay, we devoted a good chunk of a show to this, and if someone were to go back and look at the show, I think there was only one surprise: that the Lucid Air, which John was a staunch supporter of, did not win. Okay, so the car of the year is the Honda Civic, which Jack Nerad, who was on the show, basically said, if the world could only build one car, it would be the Honda Civic. The truck of the year was the Ford Maverick, which Jack Nerad, and Matt DiLorenzo were just gushing about. And the utility of the year was the Ford Bronco. Okay, John, now you put your 2 cents in.
Well, I pretty much figured that's the way it was going to go. Even though I was wowed by the Lucid Air. We all drove the launch edition. It's nearly $170,000. And, people don't like these elitist vehicles winning awards. The reason I was so in favor of it, though, is it was such a game changer. But I see why the jury went with the Honda Civic. And another thing to keep in mind is I believe most of our Canadian colleagues on the jury were unable to test drive the Lucid Air. There's been travel restrictions. I don't think Lucid could get a car up there. And so there's a chunk of points that it never got because those jurors are not going to award points to a car that they did not drive. And while the Bronco is a very worthy winner for the utility, I actually put my money on the Hyundai Ioniq 5 electric. because I thought it was much more of a step forward. I think Ford's done a brilliant job with the Bronco. Don't get me wrong, but it was the revival of something, and they had a clear target of what they had to go after, the Jeep Wrangler. For Hyundai to come out with the Ioniq 5, make it look like a hatchback, but position it as a utility, I thought was very interesting. It also comes with a 800-volt recharging system. I think that's extremely advanced for a middle market brand. So anyway, I am not arguing with the way that the results turned out, but they weren't. I did go for the Maverick, as you pointed out, Gary, but I did vote a little bit differently than the rest of the jury did.
Alexis, do you care about that at all?
No, I agree with your assessment of the winners. I will say I was surprised by the Lucid not winning as well. I pay a lot of attention to Lucid. Everything I've heard has been positive. I think they got Motor Trend's Car of the Year. I think they, have had a lot of really good technology put into their cars. Obviously, a lot of talent on that team. So I definitely was surprised, but I do think it ultimately just simply boils down to the cost of the edition that's out and available right now. $170,000 is quite steep. And of course, Lucid's CEO has mentioned that they're certainly working towards a less expensive, far more affordable lineup moving forward. So that, I figured, that would be the sticking point, as well as, of course, availability for test drives just due to restrictions right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if Lucid makes their way to the list in the coming years. So
to make Peter Rawlinson happy to know that the Honda Civic got 241 votes or points through the voting, and the Lucid Air was in second place, came in with 170. So there was 71 point spread. Okay, so it was, and the Volkswagen Golf R and GTI were down at 89. Okay, so 71. And John, unfortunately for the Bronco, the Ioniq 5 came in second place, so you were close on that one too. But the delta between the Bronco at 234 points and the Ioniq 5 at 153 points was 81. So there was a bigger gap between the two. Yeah. But I thought that the results were the biggest non-surprise of 2022. So you can, we can bookmark this, and at the end of the year, you can see if there was a bigger non-surprise than the winners. Mm-hmm. Just
kind of refreshing not to have a surprise come our way with everything else going on. Kind of refreshing.
That's true.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, good. Kumar Galhotra was very happy because he got to pick up these two trophies designed by Ed Wellburn. So
the president of Ford North America showed up for it in person and walked off with two big awards. Right.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, we're have to wrap this up now, right? But Alexa, great to have you on the show again. Really appreciate your input and your insight.
Thank you so much. Anytime. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, good. Thanks, Alexa.
And Gary, we'll do it again next week. In fact, we got the chief engineer for the Silverado all electric. So that's going to be a good show too.
It will. They all are.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, folks. See y'all later.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires. Solutions for your journey.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.